The end of World War II saw the beginning of the atomic age. The global superpowers of the United States and the Soviet Union faced off in the Cold War. America feared the Red Scare and the threat of communism at home. Hollywood capitalized on those fears with movies about monsters, Martians, and mad scientists. The following story is told by those who were a part of making those films.
I think there was a great deal of anxiety about the atomic age.
Everybody was a little worried because Russia had developed a hydrogen bomb as well as the United States, and it was an insane period.
First we had duck and cover. So in our imagination, when we duck and covered, all we could see was that white light. So that was our fear, that white light, not understanding it.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember as a kid, of course, our big thing in school was, you'd duck and cover, and I look back at it now and I think, here we are, they're going to have us get under our desk, put our arms over our neck, and then I guess pray, because if that thing went off, who cares? The next thing you know, you'd be just evaporated, so yeah, it was not much that you could do, and that's, I think, a lot of people had that. It was a little bit of hopelessness, I guess, because of the atomic age and how we had just finished, World War II, and we kind of saved the world, so to speak. And now, were we going to be able to save the world from this atomic age that we were going into?
It was just inevitable that they were going to start making movies about the atomic age.
Fear of the unknown is always something that scares the public, whether it be back in the 40s, the Val Lewton films like The Cat People, where there was just all the fear and the horror was from shadows and things that you thought were there. And that extrapolates right into the 50s when you're talking about, will we be invaded from outer space? Will a nuclear bomb be dropped here? There was, fear everywhere. Can be found and exploited by movie makers, and it certainly was through the 50s.
I think horror films reflect the times we live in, and I think whether directly or indirectly, I think that's a wonderful way to look at horror films. It was an age of innocence, and it was an age of it was a time of innocence, but there was really scary stuff going on. So I think to release that fear in an innocent way was really cathartic in the late 50s, early 60s.
My dad used to say that horror films were a form of catharsis for audiences. He always felt that what happened in horror films was people got to go and kind of escape, but they also got to release all their stress and tension, and the 50s were a time of amazing tension. Not just because of all the nuclear threats, but I think for the country, yeah, absolutely. It was a place where all those sort of latent fears that in the 50s we didn't want to talk about, we didn't say, things like cancer, and so it came out in the films.
We can fantasize and we can get away from our regular mundane world. We weren't really quite sure if there was anything out there, so to speak. And I do have a little bit of an experience where I actually saw a UFO.
As the Cold War continued to chill relations between the United States and Russia, news of a 1947 flying saucer crash in Roswell, New Mexico, spurred nervous Americans into believing aliens from outer space had landed. But in Hollywood, UFO took on a new meaning: unlimited film opportunities.
I definitely think Roswell did, in fact, have an impact on filmmakers in the early 50s. Roswell, the incident, was 1947, and it was, probably took a few years of projects to gel to come out about that subject matter. And so around 1951, beginning with The Thing from Another World, films of aliens invading our planet started, including right up to 1953 and through the 50s, Invaders from Mars from 1953. Now, there were science fiction films prior to that, but they really didn't involve aliens invading our planet, which Roswell would have put the German people's minds. Prior to that, there were French films from the silent era, German films like Metropolis from 1926, and even films like Universal doing The Invisible Ray, which is science fiction, but not really aliens from another world. So definitely Roswell, I think, had an impact on filmmakers. It made the news, it made AP back in 1947.
Rocket ship accident. Well, that was that was at the beginning of my career. And I think that the film Destination Moon was going to be coming out, and it was a big production. And it was due out 2 or 3 weeks or whatever. And Lipper, producer, director, decided to try to beat them. So they called it Rocket Ship XM, and they gathered up the performers. The second day or third day that he had decided to do this, they had us out on the desert area between Newhall and Las Vegas out there. Nothing but rock and sand. And that was supposed to represent the moon, or whatever it was. And of course, we had no script. Turning to each other occasionally, and then they dubbed in the sound later. But it made a fortune, and I was interested in space anyway. And to me, it's I think one of the great and necessary things that we do consider the moon and the possibilities there.
Side of the glass looking right into mine, I was terrified.
Face? A human face?
A ghastly caricature, like something distorted by pressure. A horrible, grotesque imitation of the face looking right into my eyes.
To think, a fantastic gnome like you had to hurtle out of space put this power into my hands. I'm going to tear out every secret you've got.
I'll give you until 11 o'clock to try what you can. If you're not back by that time, we'll open fire.
But you've got to at least give us time.
By that time, your job must be finished. If it isn't,
what's his appearance here mean?
At midnight, when the planet is at its closest approach to Earth, an invasion will be launched.
$10:59.
Fire!
The Man from Planet X, for example, that film is maybe these aliens, or is it maybe some of us?
I remember one night coming home from the movie, having seen The Man from Planet X, and laying in bed, and then I was aboard for a few hours before I did fall asleep, because I knew that Man from Planet X was coming down that hallway to get me. And you just laid there and didn't move a muscle,
They had been very successful on Man from Planet X. It was a total surprise because you have to realize that at that time there was no science fiction as we understand it. He was reliant on a good writer giving him a good script, and unfortunately that wasn't a luxury that always happened.
Wisberg and Pollexfen, who wrote The Man from Planet X, hired me to play the villain on that, Dr. Mears. Well, he was a nasty guy. He ruined the chance to communicate with the Man from Planet X. This weird little guy was in that thing. And in general, I was a mischief maker in that. So I don't know. The other things I did weren't like that. But I was available in town for any kind of misbegotten science fiction thing they had. I was in Gog and things like that where Robot killed me, and then Captive Women was another. But I don't know. Once I got started, I worked a lot, and in television I didn't stop. I could be good, or I could be bad, or I could be nasty. I could be almost anything they wanted. Any job that was offered, I took.
To think, a fantastic gnome like you had to hurtle out of space to put this power into my hands. Well, now that we've made contact, I'm going to tear out every secret you've got.
The Man from Planet X, it coasted in. It opened a week before The Thing. I think they did that deliberately, but it came out and it got the benefit of this huge wave of interest that was connected with The Thing, and which was a superior picture in every way. The Thing was a serious picture about it, and very well done.
Jack Pollexfen was a lovely man and had done both scripts of Man from Planet X and later on Daughter of Dr. Jekyll. And yes, I think Jack Pollexfen admired Dad. He knew that he could trust that he would, get the job done when nobody else could.
A personal favorite of mine, just a little film, it's The Man from Planet X. I think is a great little film. It's really a terrific film. And and the thing is, he's not a bad guy really either. It's just that this guy turns his air off or whatever he breathes and he got ticked.
Edgar Ulmer was probably capable of being a top-notch director in a lot of ways, but he got a reputation for being able to do B movies quickly, on the cheap, and still have them give me a certain look. He would draw designs if he wanted something, and sometimes they would use what he drew in the scene. So he had a good visual sense, and he was a good director. And he also could be fast. He could give them a presentable quality film. Man from Planet X, the story was interesting, but they had to do it on the cheap. They had made it for $50,000. They shot it in 6 days on a single set at the Hal Roach Studios. And it was the same set that had been left behind when they finished with it by the people who produced the Joan of Arc picture with Ingrid Bergman. We shot for 6 days, and they never left the set. Even when they had a car that had come into a shot, they would drive it into where the camera was, and then when they left, they'd just back out. They had to do that because there was no space for anything else.
We interrupt this program to give you a bulletin just received from one of our naval units at sea. A large object traveling at supersonic speed is headed over the North Atlantic toward the east coast of the United States.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Drew Pearson. We bring you this special radio television broadcast in order to give you the very latest information on an amazing phenomenon, the arrival of a space ship in Washington. The Army has taken every precaution to meet any emergency which may develop. Just a minute, ladies and gentlemen, I think something is happening.
came here to give you these facts. But if you threaten to extend your violence, this earth of yours will be reduced to a burned out cinder.
But he's a robot. Without you, what could he do?
There's no limit to what he could do. He could destroy the Earth. All vehicles, close in. Let's go.
But then you got something like Day the Earth Stood Still, which I think is still one of the great classic science fiction films, even though it's a slow film. I mean, it's not a real moving, bombastic thing, you know, but there's a lesson there. You know, they're a little ticked off because what we're doing, and they, you know, stop it or we're going to take care of you. That'd probably be the best thing could ever happen to us.
In that particular case, Michael Rennie, who played the alien, was bringing a source of intelligence and education on how we could defeat diseases on this planet. But of course, the fear overrode what his real purpose was, and we were out to get him and do in this alien because he's different. So there's those kind of underlying themes there, and Robert Wise did it beautifully in The Day the Earth Stood Still.
This movie, apart from all the other ones that were from that era, had something to say. It spoke pretty directly to MAD, where people of an age will understand that. But MAD was mutually assured destruction, right? And it didn't sit well with the politics of the time at all. And it's an interesting thing I learned later that they attempted to get cooperation from the U.S. Army for the you know, all the military stuff, and they read the script and said, no, we don't want to participate, and so they pitched it to the state military thing, and they said okay, and so all the tanks and everything are from the state rather than the government. They actually presented a story and an engaging story, I think. I mean, it holds up today, I think, as well or better than most of the 1951 movies, you know. And they did it in a really thoughtful manner. It did try and address a situation that we're still dealing with, frankly. We're all concerned about a dirty bomb somewhere, you know, and at least, I mean, the Russians weren't suicidal. So I think that whole thing about the Russians being, you know, a threat was overblown so that we could, and this goes to Eisenhower warning us about the industrial military complex or whatever it was, and this was a direct slap in the face to that.
Probably from about 1947 to 1951, there weren't even a lot of horror movies being produced, but they were running that circuit. There were reruns. Back then, we didn't have TV reruns. We had theater reruns. And all the Universal classics were still on the screen. And then suddenly there was the influx of these invaders from outer space, movies like The Thing from Another World, which is my personal favorite science fiction film. It's just so perfectly directed, and again, ends the final line of the film, not being a spoiler really with the story, but the final line is keep watching the skies. And that's what everyone was doing at that time, and that and The War of the Worlds from 1953, another great film produced by George Powell.
This could be the beginning of the end for the human race. For what men first thought were meteors or the often ridiculed flying saucers are in reality the flaming vanguard of the invasion from Mars.
Looks like they're gonna come out of that gully pretty soon. We'll have to rush our defenses to be ready when they do.
The guard can need plenty of reinforcements.
We'll get them. Lieutenant, look!
They slash across country like scythes, wiping out everything that's trying to get away from them.
That explains why communication is cut the moment their machines begin moving.
Montreal's blacked out. Nothing more's come through.
Same thing that happened on the Pacific coast. Anything from them yet?
No, Mr. Secretary, we've had nothing from San Francisco for over 5 hours.
The nations of the world mobilize their armed might, rushing to defend the Earth against the unknown weapons of the super race from the Red Planet. Is there nothing that can stop the Martian death machines?
Guns, tanks, bombs, they're like toys against them. We know now that we can't beat their machines. We've got to beat them.
All over the world, human beings cower before the onslaught of these unearthly enemies, whom no one has ever seen. Panic that sweeps around the globe as the great masses of mankind flee blindly in a headlong stampede of hysteria.
When you look back on it, and I think as I've been speaking to so many people and everyone else's opinions, that I began to think about it, I said, H.G. Wells was so upset with England confiscating half the world with British imperialism that he wrote War of the Worlds because he wanted to prove how they could be. Somebody could come in and just annihilate you, take over, and what are you going to do?
Orson Welles broadcast in 1938, thousands of people fled New Jersey because they thought they were being invaded from Mars. They really believed it. Oh, this was quite a thing. I had just arrived in this country at that time, and I was very impressed with being invaded from Mars.
I had just signed the contract, around September, October, and they were looking for someone to match Gene Barry. And at the time, I had a picture of myself on the table, what I looked like at the time with a short, bright red poodle cut. And they said, well, you don't look the part, but we're going to make you look the part. So they put 2 wigs on me, a hairpiece in front, page boy in back, took off my false eyelashes and all my glamour, and I was a little girl from Covina or West Covina, someplace over there, east of L.A.
Jack Crucian and Paul Birch and I were the 3 people that discovered the flying saucer, and we're talking about it and looking at it, and one of us says, let's go talk to them, and Jack Crucian, as the Mexican, says, well, what do we say? And I say, welcome to California.
What are we going to say to them?
Welcome to California. Come on.
We're friends. Yeah.
I would help my dad in the lab from time I could almost walk. And he had been working on The Martian for War of the Worlds and had first designed one that was 6 feet tall, 7 feet. I said 7, but I think it's more like 6. And when they went to do the farm scene, they saw the set, and the set was so small, they knew the Martian couldn't fit in there. So they couldn't rebuild the set because it was a really low budget. So they decided the Martian had to be changed, but they had to stay on schedule. They couldn't change the schedule, so it was only 24 hours to make the Martian smaller.
So they worked all night on him. They worked all night on the little one, and then brought it back the next day, and they didn't have enough time to do the arms in proportion to the smaller body. So that's why the Martian has these huge, waving arms about him. But it hadn't cured yet. It was still very soft and very wet. They wanted to put it liver all over it. And Paramount said, well, George Pell says, I think liver's a bit much.
Then when Charlie saw it, he was so proud. He could not believe that it came out so well. And that was one of his proudest monsters. I would say he was most proud of that monster. And he was so surprised that it got such recognition. He never got over that. It got that, that people were so taken by it.
Judging from the sneak preview that they had that night at the Fairfax Theater on Beverly and Fairfax, when the movie was over with, it was totally silent. It wasn't that they were startled. The audience evidently was not expecting anything quite as vivid. The idea that something from outer space, something somewhere could come and just beat the pants off of you, that was rather startling. People actually did walk out of the theater talking to one another, very quiet, looking around at the skies, very much like The Thing, look to the skies. I love that last line in that movie. No, there was quite I would say a lot of apprehension.
George Pyle did that in a lot of his films. He always ended the films with hope. Like The Time Machine, the original book, it's pretty bleak at the end. Well, George didn't want to end it that way, so he ended it with hope. He's going back now and hoping things are going to work out. War of the Worlds, they kill the bad guys. When worlds collide, they go to another planet, and there's hope. I mean, his films are always full of hope.
By 1951, Hollywood found itself in deep trouble. The Paramount Decree in 1947 had forced film studios to sell off their movie theater chains, ending the convenient production to distribution pipeline. More, the new technology of television kept millions of former moviegoers glued to their living room couches. A gimmick was needed, and that gimmick was three-dimensional movies.
Now, I assume that you all have your magic glasses on. They really are magic. And that you have them on straight. Good. Now, so far, you've seen only two of my dimensions. Up and down, that is height, and width. And now, Mr. Projectionist up there in the booth, would you be kind enough to give us the third dimension? Thank you. And the third dimension, as you well know, is depth. It's rather remarkable, isn't it?
House of Wax and Robot Monster, It Came from Outer Space. Those, interestingly, are all 3D films. That was a big year for 3D coming in. And so they're a lot of fun, but a lot of, other than It Came from Outer Space, they were focusing more on the 3D effect rather than really telling something about society. They were just telling an entertaining story and utilizing a 3D effect, which was very popular at that time.
George Pell wanted to do the end of it in 3D. So when we put our goggles on, they were going to have an announcement that everyone put their glasses on in the movie, and the rest of it was going to be in 3D, but Paramount wouldn't do it. It was entirely too expensive. I think, I have no idea what the real reason was, but they didn't go for it. So next year they come out with Buona Devil, which was absolutely a bomb. Much as I love Robert Stack, it was a terrible movie.
And it's that, the glasses used to bother you. Well, it really wasn't the glasses. It was the projection systems that bothered you. Nobody really realized what that was, because there were two projectors. Everything had to be in sync. If one projector was brighter than the other, it would affect you because that's what these lenses do. And so it did give people headaches and all kinds of stuff, things like that. And I saw, I think it was Buona Devil or something, and they had lost a couple of frames in one print, and the guy didn't go and match them. So you got like oh, I mean, it drove you crazy. I mean, because everything's out of sync just a little bit, you know. So that was bad projection. Was really kind of what killed 3D in the 50s. It really did.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Richard Carlson. I'm sure you'd all like to know something about the new entertainment miracle, Third Dimension. What it is, what it does. Well, the best way I can describe it to you is to tell you that it makes the screen absolutely real and alive. People, objects, landscapes take on a depth and a dimension such as they have in real life. And it has an added quality. Objects actually seem to come out of the screen. So real they almost touch you, creating the most dramatic impact that the screen has ever known. Coming to an incredible climax when a molten meteoric spaceship from another planet rushes out of the heavens right at you. Of course, these illustrations are only a pale suggestion of the real thing. It can't be described, it's got to be seen and experienced. And I must add that even without 3D, It Came from Outer Space is a picture that you'll long remember for its blending of science and fiction, for its eerie terror, and for its story of an invasion from another planet that's almost beyond imagining.
I got the part of Jane in It Came from Outer Space. I guess it was pure luck. They wanted to test the 3D cameras. It was going to be Universal's first 3D film. And they asked me if I would mind parading back and forth on a runway while they tested the cameras. Oh, also in a bathing suit. And they picked me because I was very three-dimensional. And they said, well, we're going to make our first 3D picture. So I said, gee, I'd like to read the script. And of course, Barbara Rush had already been cast. But there was the part of a sexy girlfriend of someone who had been taken over by the creatures from outer space. I said, I really would like to be in a 3D movie. And I said, please, please, please.
That when he came out of the gray listing, he was offered two jobs, a Broadway play and House of Wax. And he purposely picked House of Wax because it was a 3D movie, and he was really interested in what new technologies were going to do for the business. I think he felt that 3D as it was used in the 50s was very gimmicky, and he felt that the reason that House of Wax was such a success was because Andre de Toth actually didn't use 3D as sort of the whole purpose of the movie. Andre de Toth wanted to tell a great story. And so my dad always said that the reason that House of Wax was a success was because Andre de Toth had one eye and he couldn't see in 3D. And so he told a great story, and then every so often someone had to remind him, like, oh yeah, throw the ball out at the audience. Okay, we've used the 3D, let's get back to the story.
Well, I think 3D was both a gimmick and something that people like to see. When 3D works well, there's nothing better than to have something come right at you off the screen, whether it be a ping pong paddle like in House of Wax or a meteorite screaming towards the screen right at you in the opening of It Came from Outer Space.
Invaders from Mars. He saw them land from outer space. He saw them capture innocent people only to destroy. Father turned against son. People changed into strange, weird animals. A general of the army becomes a saboteur. Trusted police turned into arsonists. The boy's parents changed into killers.
But nobody's getting anywhere out there. Nobody can locate anything, anybody. The Martians, we've got to stop the...
Invaders from Mars. Capturing humans at will for their own sinister purposes, turning them into diabolical instruments of destruction. Invaders from Mars, weird, fantastic beings of a superintelligence, ruling a race of synthetic humans, and pitting them against mankind's dream to conquer the universe.
Come on, step on it. Search every tunnel. We gotta find Ronaldo and the kid. When the colonel gives the signal, get back here on the double.
Some of my favorites from 1953, Invaders from Mars with Jimmy Hunt. Again, it was an alien invasion film, and it's from the perspective of the little boy. It wasn't from an overview, like a third-person overview. It was really told from a little boy's standpoint. And for me, as a kid, seeing another 8 or 9-year-old be afraid, looking out his window at night and seeing a flying saucer landing just past his backyard, and then taking over his parents, the police. I mean, that was scary stuff. For a kid at that time to be watching it happening to another kid.
You know, Invaders from Mars, I think we started filming on that in September of 1952. And I don't remember going on an interview to get the part. But I do remember about 2 days before we started filming that I went out to Republic Studios, and we they had these storyboards all in this one kind of like an office, and it was the whole movie set up that they had done. This was going to be my first time at this genre, because most of it was always comedies or more romantic type films and or family films.
Well, Republic was kind of a home base for a lot of us. You know, the Western directors were out there, and they were the fast shooters. They really knew what they wanted and knew how to get it. And, you know, Republic was kind of a cheapo at that time.
I remember when I first saw the sets, about how stark they were and how you had these trees, you know, that were painted black, and there were no leaves on them, and I couldn't always never figure that out until, as later on you see the movie and then you realize what he's trying to get from it. But yeah, no, he did a lot on that, and it was all set up on one sound stage in Republic Studios. We had everything there. We had the sand pit, we had the hill, we had the gas station, the house, the spaceship, the observatory. Everything was on that one stage. And it was just all set up, and we just went from one area to the other. He had it well choreographed, and it worked well. And we did that movie, and I always thought it was about 3.5 weeks. Somebody said it was 4 weeks, but for making a movie, that was pretty quick. When they made the other ending, the UK ending, because people over in Europe didn't buy the dream scene, then it became just another science fiction film. But with the dream, then it was unique, and you're going, oh gosh, this thing really is happening all over again. And maybe it was a dream, but now it's really going to happen, And so I think that was the unique part of Invaders from Mars.
I tell you, gentlemen, science has agreed that unless something is done and done quickly, man, as the dominant species of life on Earth, will be extinct within a year.
Of the President of the United States, stay in your homes. I repeat, stay in your homes. Your personal safety, the safety of the entire city, depends upon your full cooperation with the military authorities.
Yes, cities, nations, even civilization itself, threatened with annihilation, because in one moment of history-making violence, nature, mad, rampant, wrought its most awesome creation. For born in that swirling inferno of radioactive dust were things so horrible, so terrifying, so hideous. There is no word to describe them.
We may be witnesses to a biblical prophecy come true, and there shall be destruction and darkness come up in creation, and the beast shall reign over the earth.
Yes, the earth, the skies above and the seas below, infested by swarms of nightmare creatures, crueler, deadlier than the armored giants of prehistoric eras. Here is a wild, headlong flight into terror, as the desert erupts with the grim battle for survival. Here is a fear-frenzied moment of suspense, as mankind totters before a thing that multiplies faster than it can be killed. Here is a desperate plunge into the black depths of the earth, where human courage challenges the brute force, the slashing jaws, the poison fangs that guard the subterranean nest where the beast spawns its terrible progeny.
To all units, condition red, drain 267 is the target area. Repeat, condition red, drain 267 is the target area.
We could use?
No, we can't take a chance. It might poison the whole city.
As the 50s rolled on, there were a lot of big bug movies, things like Them with ants, and it all related to the whole nuclear thing with somehow radiation was going to make everything gigantic. There was the amazing Colossal Man, and just lots and lots of big monster movies started coming out. And there was actually one where it went the other direction too, The Incredible Shrinking Man. A little bit later in the 50s, radiation actually shrunk somebody. But they are very popular, giant radiation doing something. Beginning of the end, it was grasshoppers, the deadly mantis. It was a giant praying mantis. It seems that nuclear tests and radiation were doing all kinds of nasty things to the environment and creating monsters that were going to devour us. Well, I've never seen a giant ant, but doesn't mean it couldn't happen.
He used to call it them. Yeah, I remember. Again, I had this marvelous scene out in the desert where there's a shot of me looking out the window, and what is that noise, you know? I don't remember. I had one line, but I don't remember what it was. I played an ambulance attendant. Characteristic Gordon Douglas was the director.
Science couldn't explain it, but there it was, alive in the deep, deep waters of the Amazon. A throwback to a creature that had existed 100 million years ago, immensely strong and destructive. A woman's beauty, the bait that brought it out of its lair. See underwater thrills never photographed before. See Titanic underwater battles never dreamed of before in this most terrifying of the science fiction adventures.
I didn't really think of it much at the time. I just thought, well, all right, we'll do this movie. I've done a lot of other movies I wasn't crazy about doing, so okay. And of course it was fun. It did turn out to be fun doing it, and I liked everybody on it. I liked the director very much, Jack Arnold, and Richard Carlson, Richard Denning, and of course the dear fellows in the suits, Ben Chapman and Riku Brani. And so it was really fun. So I think it's more of an old-fashioned type of story, like the Frankenstein or the whatever, so that it is in that way, except the creature becomes quite sympathetic in the picture, which I loved, that was worked out that way, that the one we were terrified about really became more or less the victim in this picture, and we had great sympathy for the creature when he was just sort of sinking back down into the lagoon.
So they called me, and it happened to be Jack Arnold, and he said, "We like the way you swim. How would you like to be an underwater monster?" And I said, "Why not?" And I went to California, made the suit, and then that's history. The way I swim as the creature is the way I normally swim. So it's not something I had to learn, and they liked it, so that's the way the creature swam.
It was really a good shoot. I mean, and we laughed a lot, I mean, it was, when you're doing Creature from the Black Lagoon, you can't take it all too seriously every day. You do your laugh, and then you go in and do the scene very seriously, of course.
Well, yeah, there's one thing about the creature, is it has a lot of scientific stuff in there that they brought in at the time, which is true. The sequels kind of went that way, too, where they actually can turn him almost into a human being with the science they have now and the stuff they have. I'm sure that's going to happen someday.
We feel for him. He's in this strange body, but that he has human longings and human feelings, and that makes it very poignant because we really do feel for him.
I breathed from an air hose. It's kind of like if you're in the backyard watering. You drink water out of the hose. You drink what water you want, let the rest spill out. Well, breathing from an air hose is the same way. You breathe the air in, what you want, and the rest just spills out. And I had safety people, each with an air hose. And I would breathe and then get ready to go into a scene. I'd hold my breath, swim in and do the scene, and I'd get air from another safety person with another air hose. We had a signal that if I went totally limp, that meant I needed air. And it worked out well, and we didn't have any problems.
I think that's one of the most beautiful things in the film is that sort of underwater ballet kind of thing where she's swimming on top and he's underwater, and it's very romantic in its own way. And the swimmers, Riku Brownie, and her name has gone out of my mind at the moment, but they were both so wonderful. And we went to the dailies. While we were shooting the movie, they were in Florida shooting that, and we were all entranced watching the dailies. And Scotty Welburn, of course, the underwater cameraman, did a great job, with the camera strapped on him, and to do that underwater and get all that wonderful film was great. And Ben Chapman would come out and he would say, and sometimes out of makeup, I'd see him and I'd say, "Good morning, BC," and pat him on the gills or whatever, So we all had our laughs about it, but we took the work very seriously.
To me, the funniest thing was we shot in the wintertime, and the air temperature was in the low, high 40s or 50. The water temperature was 71, and I was in this suit, and it's like a wetsuit. You get wet inside. And we're out there all day long working off the barge, into the water, in and out of the water. And I got pretty cold. And I was shivering, so somebody came up and gave me a little shot of brandy. And then another crew man would come over and give me another little shot of brandy, not knowing that someone else had already given me some. And this went on all day. And pretty soon they had a pretty drunk creature. So they stopped that.
Paul Blaisdell was a master monster maker. He created the monsters that you've seen on screen, like the she creature, Beast with a Million Eyes, It the Terror from Beyond Space. A lot of really great costumes from Hell It Came's another one.
I remember one of the movies that Roger did, and the end of it, it was I Conquered the World. I don't remember, but they ran out of money at the end, and they couldn't come up with money to make a monster, and they got a tea kettle and put holes in it and had steam coming out of it, and that was the monster.
And poor Paul Blaisdell, here again, never got the credit he should have gotten, because, he and his wife made the monsters, and they made them for nothing, practically. He just did it by the seat of his pants. And he did some pretty cool stuff, I thought. I thought Beulah from It Conquered the World was this really great-looking thing. But Paul would take into account, like, what was it's supposed to come from Venus, so, okay, what is the pressure there? So he had all kinds of stuff figured out. And originally, it was supposed to stay in the cave, and it looked really creepy in the cave, because you could just see the claws and the eyes glowing and stuff. And then at the very last minute, Roger wanted to bring it out of the cave, Roger Corman, and have it killed. And Paul said, it's going to look like a teepee walking out. What can you say? It's going to look terrible, And we were at the preview, and sure enough, everybody's going for it till it came out, and everybody was laughing like crazy. I worked on some pot boilers, I guess you'd call them that, with Paul Blaisdell, and, Day the World Ended was supposed to be about these mutants that have kind of taken over, the last people on Earth things. And, Invasion of the Saucermen, you got the guys from outer space coming down then, Well, there was even rumors that the flying saucer things, which started in like 47 or something like that, were probably from Russia. But he liked Paul's work, and he liked Paul. And the next thing he did, here again, a Red Scare movie, an atomic bomb movie about this mutant. All these mutants were formed from the radiation stuff. And they even tied that in with the bomb tests, the bikini bomb tests and all that stuff, where they had animals there, and they actually did change and stuff. That was kind of based on that, loosely,
Last-minute preparations were also underway. Animals of various kinds were readied for tests to tell what effects the bomb had on living things. The sheep, first sheared, are then covered with ointment as protection against flesh burns. The effects of the bomb on these animals, while not conclusive, will furnish many clues as to the effect on human beings.
So he did this three-eyed mutant, which was really a cool guy. And the very first thing that Paul worked on for him, now he really directed it, but he didn't take the credit for directing it. He gave it to another guy, was a thing called the Beast with a Million Eyes. Well, Paul built this little puppet thing that comes out of the spaceship at the end. Everybody got on him because he only had 2 eyes. Well, the beast is a mind beast that controls all the animals and stuff, which is a pretty good story, actually. It didn't control people, but the animals. It turned the animals on people. Cows would kill people, dogs, whatever it was. Birds would attack people. And but this is the slave of the beast, supposedly, that's in this saucer. The beast can't really get out of there. He has to stay there, but he can do all the mind contact stuff. And that's why there's a million eyes. He can control a million animals, you know. But the beast comes out, and the California smog gets him, and he dies. Puppet people, I thought, was really kind of a neat idea. Really kind of a cool idea. And Paul made the little puppets, and he made giant puppets when you see the actors working with them and stuff like that. He made the big coffee cup. He made the big bar of soap. The only thing he didn't make was the big telephone. The Bell telephone people had that phone. They had a great big giant phone. It just happened to work, happened to be the right scale, you know. But he made a big pencil, I think, and maybe a what the heck was in the rulers. I don't know. He made a lot of big props and things like that. And then for Colossal Man, he did just kind of the opposite. He made, like, the Sands Hotel was still there. He made the big sand sign that the Amazing Colossal Man comes in and crashes, and some of the cowboy thing. He made that and stuff like that. I mean, Paul was such a unique, creative guy. I mean, he just had it in his brain. Paul had some really great days there. He did. They screwed him over, though, like, well, the studios do. The more things he did, he kind of wanted a little more money, and they said, well, look, we're just a growing company, and you're part of our company. You're a family. You'll grow with us. As we grow, you will grow, and we'll get you more money. Well, it turned just the opposite. They finally got to a point saying, okay, we want you to do this film, or whatever it was, and then, but we can't pay you anymore. And Paul said, well, I just don't want to do it then. I mean, really, you know, I think I deserve to get more money. Now, my monsters are what's selling these movies, you know. Al Arkoff said, well, if that's the way you feel, we'll get some college kid and have him just make a monster for nothing. And that's exactly what they did with a thing called Beast from Haunted Cave or something. This guy just, you know, built out of chicken wire, and it looked like chicken wire with angel hair on it, and it was pretty bad, you know. But they got it for nothing, so what could they say, you know? And so Paul, that was kind of starting the end of his career right there, which was so unfair, so unfair. Did a couple of more films, not for AIP. He did It to Terror from Beyond Space, which I think is one of his best films he did. I think that's pretty much what Alien's based on, and everybody's admitted that, you know, about a thing in a spaceship killing off the people one by one. And I think it was one of his best monsters too. It was really a creative guy, because Paul would think about, okay, how is it on Mars? How is it on Venus when he did the Beulah, the Conquer the World thing? It's low gravity, low center of gravity, trapped to be low to the ground. I mean, that's the way he thought about stuff. It wasn't just, I'm going to just design this monster for fun. It had to be kind of a reason for it, you know. And he thought, well, it's got to have scales. It's got to be pretty strong because it's in the sandstorms and all that kind of stuff. And it was a pretty frightening picture. Surprisingly, it was pretty frightening. They used Ray Corrigan in it, though, and usually Paul always did his own monsters. Well, Ray Corrigan's like 6'6", Paul was 5'8". Crash Corrigan's head was 10 times bigger than Paul's head, so he always did his head on his own face and did it. Well, it didn't quite fit. Everybody thought it was a tongue, and nobody even complained at all. They all thought it was a tongue. Well, it wasn't. It was his chin. So it was kind of weird. It was hot to wear and everything, but it was neat. But that turned out to be his last film.
Sometimes he was inside of them, sometimes not. But it's rather a sad case where he really never got the financial rewards or the recognition while he was alive. Making these movies or making these monsters, like It Conquered the World's another one. Iconic looking monsters. He would design the suits, and they, along with some assistance from Bob Burns, and they were great monsters. But again, he passed away before all the recognition for his work really came about.
Imagine yourself as one of the crew of this faster-than-light spaceship of the future, sharing their curiosity to know the unknown, their tension, their readiness for inconceivable adventures.
Sir, we're being radar scanned. United Planets Cruiser C-57D, J.J. Adams commanding. Who are you?
Morbius of the Bellerophon.
Well, Dr. Morbius, my orders are to survey the situation on Altair 4.
Commander, if you set down on this planet, I warn you that I cannot be answerable for the safety of your ship or your crew.
When you reach the Forbidden Planet, you will meet Dr. Morbius, played by Walter Pidgeon. The doctor is sole owner of this fabulous world. Anne Francis is his alluring daughter, Alta, who has never seen a young man till she meets Commander Adams, played by talented Leslie Nielsen.
Come on in.
Didn't bring my bathing suit.
What's a bathing suit?
Oh, murder.
You will meet a charming character in The Robot, able to produce, on order, 10 tons of lead or a slinky evening gown. Always at your service.
It must be the loveliest, softest thing you've ever made for me. And fit in all the right places, with lots and lots of star sapphires.
Star sapphires take a week to crystallize properly. Would diamond or emeralds do?
You explore all the wonders of a vanished civilization. You travel deep down into the heart of the Forbidden Planet to discover the incredible marvels of this lost genius race. These magnificent scenes in striking Eastman color stagger the imagination.
20 miles. Look down, gentlemen. Are you afraid? 7,800 leveled.
Yet the wonders of the planet Altair 4 conceal a strange and evil force, unknown, irresistible.
I was a contract player at MGM Studios, and you pretty much do what the boss tells you to do. And I got word, came down through the Al Trisconi, the talent department at MGM, you're to play Crewman Gray, and yes, boss. So it was a wonderful experience, walking on that stage 27, which was the largest stage at MGM Studios, had been totally transformed to be like Altair 4, a planet. I mean, you walked on that soundstage and there was a spaceship sitting in front in the center of the stage, and backdrops all the way around with stars twinkling. So it was really got you in the mood real quick, you know.
20 miles. Look down, gentlemen. Are you afraid? 7,800 leveled.
They started on a small budget. The studio actually has A, cinematographers, and B. They have the A, places to shoot, and B. We were lucky. The A's weren't working, so we got the finest cinematographer in the business, Harry Stradling, and one of them, not sure which one, and all of the great equipment and all of what you call special effects. They had a lot of good special effects. The best. Metro had everything. That was the place.
Working with Fred Wilcox, the director, was pleasant. He was a nice guy, and one day he didn't show up for work. And everybody said, "Where's Fred?" And they couldn't find Fred. And they finally found him in a bungalow behind the Beverly Hills Hotel, drunk. So it didn't bother any of us. One guy came in, and I don't know who it was, that covered for Fred for a couple of days, and then Fred was back on the job. He was related to one of the guys at the top of the Thalberg building over there, you know. So Fred had job security.
Forbidden Planet today is one of the most interesting stories of any film that was ever made. They shot it on stage 24, I believe. Everything. They didn't go off the lot, you see. It's right up there, you know, it's right up there with... And why? Because it was really it came from a very fine editor, not editor, very fine writer, Shakespeare. You know, The Tempest. It's taken from a wonderful, wonderful fellow that could write.
Doctor, will you tell these fools I'm not crazy? Make them listen to me before it's too late! Listen to me. Please listen. If you don't, if you won't, if you fail to understand, then the same incredible terror that's menacing me will strike at you!
They come from another world, spawned in the light years of space, unleashed to take over the bodies and souls of the people of our planet, bringing a new dimension in terror to the giant super scope screen.
Whatever intelligence or instinct it is that can govern the forming of human flesh and blood out of thin air is fantastically powerful, beyond any comprehension.
A cursed, dreadful, malevolent thing was happening to those he loved.
This isn't just an ordinary body, is it? I never saw one like it. It looks unused.
The sensational star discovery of The View from Pompey's Head. And now an undreamed of horror makes her life and love a vortex of fear.
Jack! Where do they come from?
I don't know.
Suddenly, while you're asleep, they'll absorb your minds, your memories.
I don't want any part of it.
You're forgetting something, Miles.
What's that?
You have no choice.
From city to city, an incredible hysterical panic spreads. As the unimaginable becomes real, the impossible becomes true.
Stop and listen! Stop and listen to me! Listen! Listen! Listen to me! They're not human! Can't you see? Everyone! They're here already! You're next!
Yeah, in 1956, there were a lot of films coming out, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers in particular, a real favorite because I got to know the lead actor, Kevin McCarthy, quite well. We had him many times at our conferences, and he was an amazing guy, and the film, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, is an amazing movie. It works on multiple levels. Not only is it just a scary horror movie where you have these two people that are being just chased by aliens who look just like us.
Is that me?
Operator, get me a better connection.
I'll try, Doctor. It's no use. All the Los Angeles circuits are dead.
All right, try Sacramento. Give me the state capital. I want to talk to the governor.
And of course that ties right into the parallel, and I'm sure it was an underlying theme of the Red Scare at that time. People that look just like us, like someone living in Russia, they could be up to evil things. And so there was that Red Scare thing going on, as well as it just being a great story, great acting, and you never know when a pod would end up in your basement, replicating you, and then you would be done away with, and an exact replica would take your place.
I went to sleep, Miles, when it happened.
Oh, Becky.
They were right.
I should never have left you.
Stop acting like a fool, Miles, and accept us.
No. Never.
He's in here! He's in here!
It was a wild concept and just executed perfectly on all levels.
It's Orson Welles speaking. I just saw the impossible happen before my astounded eyes. I saw a man grow smaller and smaller day by day. I saw the loneliest and most frightened creature on earth living a nightmare in a world of giants. The incredible shrinking man.
The incredible shrinking man.
Jack Arnold was a very good director, so that was almost, I would say, almost an A picture. He was very considerate of most actors, but he would sometimes get a little impatient with actors who he didn't feel that they were really up to the mark. But I admired Jack. He was a real craftsman. He really knew what he was doing, and that's a marvelous picture. The Incredible Shrinking Man. But then it has a marvelous script by Richard Matheson. A really terrific writer, Matheson. And I imagine he would be happy to let that picture stand for the high quality of his work, because it's a very interesting idea and kind of crazy, which is great. Matheson could do that really well. What an interesting idea. The guy disappearing into the interior of the atom, and there again the other particles that are around the nucleus of the atom they're spinning around like stars or planets or something. It was a fascinating idea, that this idea of getting smaller and smaller, and then the stuff with the spider was really well done, spooky. And Grant Williams, is it? Yeah. I don't know that he ever did anything else. He was under contract to Universal, but he was very good in it. I had a line, "People don't get smaller," Mr. whatever his name was, I don't remember now. "People don't get smaller, Mr. Thaw."
People don't get shorter, Mr. Carey. They just don't get shorter.
Well, Burt Gordon, he's the guy that made a lot of the big monster, big bugs. He did the spider, the giant spider.
There may be more giant spiders coming into the world. They may even be hatching from their eggs in some remote spot right now. Do you realize how easy it would be for them to overcome us humans?
I was at a funeral. So afterwards, I'm sitting at a table, long table, with the different guests. I don't know anybody, right? So a man sitting over on the other side said, he was with another man, there were two men. He said, "You're Burt Gordon, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you have any screenplays that you'd like to make?" I said, "Of course." He said, "Look, we're Arkoff is my name, Sam Arkoff. Come up to see me. Here's my card, and bring your story and tell us about it." So, great. Well, I didn't have any new screenplay, and I said yes, but so anyway, I'm thinking, and I came up with an idea in my mind, The Amazing Colossal Man, and I went to the meeting and I said yes. I am working on the story, screenplay, Amazing Colossal Man. Made a deal with him.
Did The Amazing Colossal Man? And he did his own special effects, which is kind of cool. They're a little crude for their times, but he did it all on the camera himself. Now that says something. He didn't have a big special effect crew to do stuff. He did it himself. He and his wife did it.
Ideas just come to me. You look at all my movies. I didn't stay awake night. They come to me. Right now, tonight I could sit down and write start a new screenplay. Because they're all strange ideas that I have. Giant grasshoppers, giant rats, a giant spider. I made this giant spider movie. All kinds of
crazy movies.
Talking about Burt, the movies that he did, I mean, especially during that period where, you know, so many of them are cult movies also because they're such perfection. He was just wonderful and so dedicated. You know, there was not too much hilarity on when you were shooting with Burt because it was work. And you worked hard and you got it done, and it was perfection when it was done.
Burt Gordon, he got the nickname Mr. Big, which is his initials, B-I-G, Mr. Big, from Forrest J. Ackerman, a famous Monsters magazine. And he's a super guy to know, and he was the person that actually made it happen, made those beasts that were affected by radioactivity grow. He was not only a special effects guy, he was a director, a writer, and he still is today. He's still working. He did the amazing Colossal Man, and then he also did horror movies like Tormented, and then into the 70s he was doing things like Food of the Gods, an H.G. Wells film where you have giant bugs and giant creatures once more because of radioactive glop.
Cyclops was my first movie that I made without anybody. So I went into my room on my typewriter, and I started to put a paper in, and I wrote the Cyclops. I figured, here's a monster, I can really, do it. So I finished the screenplay, the Cyclops. Now I have to find out somebody to read it. And I went around to the studios, I couldn't get anyone to read it. So somebody told me that there was a lawyer that helped people finance movies. So I went up to see this lawyer. He said, I'll read your screenplay. So a week later, I called him. You read my screenplay? He said, yes. He said, I'm not going to get you anyone to finance this. I'm going to finance it myself. And I made the movie for $100,000. And it was a hit, smash hit. Really a smash hit. Had a lot of visual effects and something. It was great.
The death-defying courage of a beautiful girl.
My name is Susan. Susan Winters.
He's looking at her.
Can you hear me?
Here is nature gone mad, revealing an unbelievable world of terror. A world mastered by a monstrous mutation. The spawn of nuclear fury. Here is a weird, suspense-filled journey that hurtles you into the most frightening adventure the screen has ever shown.
There was from what I understood, the bigger production companies were doing big money movies, so they weren't really focusing on teenagers at all. And so there was nobody taking that into account as to that whole range of money being out there. Teenagers. There was an audience that wasn't being, used, and they were the AIP really focused on that.
Jim Nicholson of AIP, American International Pictures, was the nicest guy I think I've ever met. He's the guy who came up with the titles. He would come up with titles before they had a story. The She Creature, he came up with that. It Conquered the World, he came up with that title. Day the World Ended was his title. The Invasion of the Saucer Men, all this kind of... Then they'd write the story around that, which is kind of cool. Sam Arkoff was the movie mogul. He was the attorney for the company, for one thing. Had the big cigar and always had people around him all the time. He played the part. He was the Harry Cohen of AIP. That's what he was. He walked with his cigar and stuff, and kind of pompous. But that's part of it.
The great influence of the teenagers, who sort of demanded during the late 50s and of course during the 60s that they be heard from. You see that nobody had ever heard from the teenagers before. Basically, pictures hadn't even been made.
When the middle-aged and older people cut their movies down to an absolute minimum while they were staying at home, we started to make pictures for teenagers, by teenagers, about teenagers. and starring teenagers.
It was kind of a wonderful time for motion pictures as far as teenagers were concerned, because up until that point, they sort of, well, they were mostly drive-in type movies and whatever, but they weren't geared for teenagers. And I Was a Teenage Werewolf was one of the first of that type. In fact, when I was asked to do it, my agent said, "No, you're not going to do that. A movie called I Was a Teenage Werewolf, you'll never see the light of day." And I said, "Oh, but it must be kind of fun, you know." And so we went ahead because I decided I did want to see it. Be in it. And then when they told me I was going to sing a song in it and all that stuff.
Meeny, miny, moe. I want a gal with a lot of dough. When I find her, we're gonna swing up to the preacher with a wedding ring. Tell me where she is, 'cause I don't know. So eeny, meeny, miny, moe.
And it was the beginning of a whole new cult classic thing for America's teenagers, along with the drive-in movies and all those other things that were a part of their lifestyle to begin with. But during that period after that, I did, in a period of a little over a year, I did about 11 movies, and they were all primarily, except for a couple, geared for the teenage population. It did turn out to be a fun movie, and when it was released, why, it made a lot of money, many millions more than it was ever thought about being paid for it. So it was a wonderful break for all of us.
Help me, doctor, please! I know they're going to catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me!
Michael Landon in a powerful performance as the boy possessed.
At that period, I had met him and I knew his wife then, but Michael was very dedicated and he was serious about being an actor and all that stuff, and especially when we were doing Teenage Werewolf with all the funny things that were supposedly going on, and on the set too, he stayed right with it, and he made it the great character that it became.
And my father supposedly came up with that name. I think somebody came up with Teenage Werewolf, and then my father came up with I Was a Teenage Werewolf, and then I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, and then it became the posters for the drama. But most of it is, were for younger people, and it was humorous. They knew that these monsters really didn't look that great, and a lot of the stuff that they did. So he said his movies were really more for humorous and for teenagers, and they were more innocent. And my father was pretty much of an innocent man.
Oh, what a treasure he is. I mean, he's an actor's actor. Unfortunately, I didn't have any scenes with him in the movie, but it was just to meet him and talk to him, and he loved telling stories about some of the people that he had worked with, and we know he worked with a lot of the great people in the business, but he was just such a pro.
Seems like others have the same idea.
They come up here for some quiet necking. It's a lover's lane.
Oh, that's interesting. Sort of a private preserve for teenagers, huh? I suppose as adults we're lucky to find a parking space.
But we'll turn on the radio and do what the teenagers do. They tell me it's loads of fun.
Ah, yes, with Whit Bissell. Whit was very nice man, very serious and together and knew his lines, and it was nice working with Whit. Horrible picture. They fed me to the crocodiles.
Poor Margaret. You've done your work well. You've earned your reward.
My new face?
Exactly.
Arkoff and Nicholson were masters of the teenage market, and they would take great great titles and make movies out of them. It was, and they did that for all types of exploitation films, but in particular science fiction.
Will everyone in the theater hold on firmly to his seat, please? Stop it! Stop it! I'm Vincent Price. What unearthly horror did that girl gaze upon? What manner of incredible thing walked beneath that hood? It would be unfair at this time to show you any more of what went on in that laboratory where a man actually dared to play God. So fantastic, words can't begin to describe it. You must see it with your own eyes to believe it. When the fly comes your way.
It isn't like any other fly I've ever seen. Leave it alone! No! No! Please let me look at the fly.
I've killed Andre. Please help me. Call the police and...
The charge can only be murder.
There were no mistresses. I had no lovers.
Why did you kill him?
God, don't let it get out.
Inspector, it's in the garden. Come quickly.
As God is my witness, I saw the thing. It's unbelievable. I shall never forget that scream as long as I live.
The fly is on its way. Watch out for it. It's far beyond anything your mind could ever conceive.
It's very funny. Fox offered me The Fly, but I wasn't the first choice. There was another contract player called Rick Jason, and he was offered the part, and he turned it down because, as I understand, he didn't like wearing the cloth on his head for a third of the film, and then the other third of the film with the terrible makeup and whatever. So then, also, I think they offered it to Vincent Price, but Vincent said he wanted to play the brother. So I was next in line, and I read the script, and I absolutely loved it. I knew it was going to be a winner. I knew it was going to make a lot of money. And I went running up to Buddy Adler, who was then head of production. And I said to him, Buddy, this is going to make a lot of money. Believe me. I said, what we have to do with the fly part, it should be progressive makeup. It is slowly, you can see that progression. So by the time she pulls that cloth off, it is really terrific. You could see really and the fear and the passion and all that goes on in the expression, in the eyes. But he said, oh no, we're going to put you in a plaster cast, Dave, and it's going to be fine. Ben and I will do the makeup, and he's terrific. I said, I know he's terrific. I think Andre... My part was he was very altruistic, and he cared about the world, and he thought if this actually worked, that there would be no starvation in the world. Things could be transported instantly from one place to the other. The atoms broken down, and there they are. And he believed in that, and he was not a mad scientist, by God, no. But of course, by the time he turned into a fly, it got pretty horrific. And but no, he had so many good qualities, and that's what he wanted for the world, and wanted to do as much as he could. He was a good scientist. 20th Century Fox opened The Fly on 400 theaters simultaneously. And in the Motion Picture Herald, there was a 2-page ad, and it said, "The Fly is open, asterisk. 400 theaters never saw anything so big." Well, today they'd laugh. They pulled it. It was never shown again.
And, I have friends of mine call me up when it first came out, and I'd pick up the phone, hello, and I'd hear, long pause, help me. I don't know, God. What's funny about that help me, when I did that scene, it was really horrific because I was screaming, help me, because there was this spider coming towards me. And I imagine this actually taking place. And I was screaming and yelling and trying to get away from this horrible fly. And by the time the scene was over, and I'm shouting and yelling and whatnot, this cut, and the crew burst into applause because it was really horrific. So when I saw the film and I saw what they did, what do they call it? They stripped up the sound, and it was high-pitched, saying, help me, and I couldn't believe that they did that. And it was almost comedic to me. But evidently it worked, and a lot of people liked it.
I think my dad was too busy laughing during that movie to think about the future. Apparently that last scene where, they're looking and going, help me, they got hysterical laughing. I mean, they literally were doubled over. The director kept having to throw them off the set. They could hardly get those takes done. So, that's a very good question. Did my dad think that, we'd reached there in science? Yeah, sure. I think he really believed, he used to say, look at the course of my lifetime. In the course of my lifetime, he was born in 1911. I mean, the technology that happened between 1911 and 1993 puts what's happening now, it pales by comparison. So I think he thought anything was possible, sure.
Well, you're right, it was very difficult to see. But there was one little slit there by here that I could kind of look around like that and like this and whatever. So then when I was tearing up, I took the hatchet and I was tearing up the laboratory, and I was swinging this thing all over the place. And the take was over, and he said, the crew member came up to me and said, David, my God. He says, you nearly lost your leg. You just missed it. He says, by that much. You were so... I said, well, I'm here, it's done, and it worked.
In 1958, James Warren and Forrest J. Ackerman launched Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine. It was marketed to kids of the atomic age who were seeing the classic horror films on television and in theatrical reruns. There were many imitators, but Famous Monsters dominated fandom for over 20 years.
Monster Bash magazine, inspired by Famous Monsters of Filmland. Never heard of that. No, of course it was. I grew up with probably every young boy and some girls in the 60s reading Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine. Also, there was Castle of Frankenstein. And then there were fun things that Stan Lee was involved with from Marvel Comics. He was doing things called Monster Madness, where they take photos of classic monster movies and give them funny captions. All that was part of the big ball of wax of pop monster culture, and it's definitely affected me. Also, just came to mind For Monsters Only is another one that I used to get when I was a kid. And of course, that's all affected me greatly, and I love that stuff. And I pour that love right back out with Monster Bash magazine.
Paul and I were sitting around one night, and the other monster magazines were coming at the end. Famous Monsters were already out, but then you had Modern Monsters and Monsters from here and there and everywhere, And we were looking at some of the monster magazines, and we just kind of decided one night, we should do a monster magazine of our own, With Paul being a monster maker, we could tell people how to make monsters, because that's the thing the other magazines did. It worked really well, and I came up with the thing of the Monster of the Month, the fold-out, like Playboy, just for kids. We're going to do it one time just to see what happened. Well, it caught on so much, everybody wanted it. And they'd buy 2 copies of the magazine because they'd tear that off, hang it up. So it was great for us, we thought. It was fun until we found out that the guy was using us, and we lost everything, including a lot of my stills were gone. And so we learned a bitter lesson at that time, and that's where Paul started getting very bitter after that. The movies had already screwed him over. Now a magazine had screwed him over, So he just kept getting bitter and bitter. And at the end of his life, he wasn't the same guy I knew.
What was it, this cosmic phantom, this being, boneless, fleshless, almost invisible, stalking the Earth, leaving panic behind?
Kathy, what is it? What's wrong?
In there, it was horrible.
There's our cosmic man. Like a solid mass, and yet he's not solid. Like a creature made of matter, and yet more like antimatter.
This sphere from outer space, impervious to heat, impossible to move. Was it a satellite sent to spy on Earth? A spaceship? A secret weapon? Science was baffled. The Army ready to accept the challenge.
Radio the base. Have every available man stationed around those atomic plants.
I am here, in the darkness.
I demand you state your business here.
Your demands mean nothing to me.
The Cosmic Man was always invisible through the whole picture, kind of like the Invisible Man type thing. And in the film, as you saw, when he put on Earth clothes, he became lifelike until the end. There was some critics actually knocked it a little bit. They thought they borrowed some ideas from the day the time the Earth stood still. The day that what was the name of the? And that was a good film. 1951 was kind of setting the stage for other films to come. The film, as you say, depicted the scientist as thinking that this alien from another planet was here on a peace mission and a do-gooder. Military immediately wanted to capture and destroy it, no matter what. And ultimately, in the end, that's what happened, but there's that question mark, did it really? All in 72 minutes, and the day the Earth stood still didn't cover all of that. So there is differences between the two films. And the words that it was really wordy for science fiction terms. Photon chamber.
Why, this is the photon chamber. You found a mistake.
I didn't touch this diagram.
Because I'm supposed to be this brilliant little kid with a physics mind or something, and I'm saying things like Alpha Centauri, 180,000 miles from the Earth's surface.
You know how far it is to the nearest star?
Alpha Centauri, 4 light years, I think.
You think right.
They filmed it at Samuel Goldwyn Studios. Was where all the interior shots were filmed. And I showed up there, and I had the script. It was the only science fiction film I'd ever done at that point, and my agent thought it'd be a good thing to do. It was 1959, so it really wasn't one of those early 50s sci-fi things.
I did not want to frighten you. You are Catherine Grant?
Forgive me, I didn't hear your car drive in.
My vehicle is parked beyond.
That guy's a character, and I think I had more scenes with him than anybody else did because he had an ulterior motive to get to know me. As you know, I was crippled in the picture. I'm confined to a wheelchair. Supposedly it was 6 months to live from some pre-existing childhood disease or something. And my mother comes up there one night and sees him playing chess with me.
Did you say checkmate?
Check.
Ken, what are you doing up at this hour? Who are you?
We've been playing chess and all kinds of games.
I don't understand. You've no right to. Ken, you should have called me. It's the middle of the night. Ken must have his rest.
It was my fault, Mother. I asked him to stay. We were having such fun.
Yes, we were having fun, weren't we? The boy has given me much pleasure and a needed diversion from my work.
And he was a good chess player, too. A chess-playing alien. And I did enjoy it because, everything sounded... He always delivered his lines the same way. And he was actually quite a humorous guy off camera. He used to tell jokes and actually have the cast and crew cracking up all the time.
Looks like a small rat.
Shrews as small as rats, perfect for scientific experiments, until they began to grow and grow into things.
They must eat 3 times their own weight in food every 24 hours.
There are 200 or 300 giant shrews out there. Monsters weighing between 50 and 100 pounds.
That's as big as a full-grown wolf.
Blood-curdling, horrifyingly poisonous monsters.
It was the livestock. The shrews got into the barn.
The wildest of flesh eaters, threatening all mankind. Your flesh will crawl with fear at their nearness.
The shrews were out there. I couldn't take a chance.
Went down to Texas. They really didn't have any money. But it was a little so-called horror film, drive-in type horror film. And the story was that these scientists on this island injected something in these little baby shrews and made them big as dogs. They were furious. You know, they eat 4 times their weight every day or they starve to death. I said, well, what are you using for shrews? You know, and they said, we're using dogs. So they put these fuzzy rugs on these dogs with the fake fangs. It's ridiculous. The picture was so bad, it was one of the worst movie ever made, I think. The dogs that we used on the show were coon dogs, or hound dogs. They call them coon dogs, hound dogs down there. So Ray Kellogg, the director, said, I don't know exactly how we're going to do this. We want the shrews, the dogs with the rugs on them, to chase you up the hill. And I said, I have an idea. I'm an old country boy back in Indiana. So I said, take a raccoon and put him in a cage so we don't hurt the raccoon. There wouldn't have anything happen to the dogs or the raccoons. I love animals. And I said, but drag the cage so you get the scent where you want me to run, and then, you know, take the coon away, and then when you roll the camera, and then they, all right, come on. I come running up the hill, and all of a sudden they let the dogs loose, and these dogs are chasing my backside up that hill. I wasn't too sure they were after the raccoon scent. I don't know, you know. But I climbed over the fence just in time. Them snapping at my backside. Sometimes it takes bravery to be an actor, especially if it's not rehearsed.
I'm William Castle, and I feel obligated to warn you about the next attraction you will see at this theater. The picture is The Tingler, which I directed. And for the first time in motion picture history, members of the audience, including you, will actually play a part in the picture. You will feel some of the physical reactions, the shocking sensations experienced by the actors on the screen. I guarantee that The Tingler has more shocks per minute than my last film, The House on Haunted Hill. But don't be alarmed. You can protect yourself. When you see the picture, you will be told, and remember the instruction, how you can guard yourself from attack by The Tingler.
He was a master showman who knew how to get people into the theater. And even if he didn't have much to work with, the House on Haunted Hill with Emergo, you know, the scariest process ever in theaters. And really what it was a string, a line with a plastic skeleton that would slide on it down through the audience. But he knew how to promote it no matter what he had. In The Tingler, putting motors underneath some of the seats and having them fire off where it would vibrate people's seats at certain times of the film, and plant people that would scream. was the master. He was the master showman with movies like 13 Ghosts and just on and on and on. All of his films, he would come up with something that was a great gimmick.
I think Dad was completely in awe of the promotions, and my father has become known as a sort of promotional master himself, you know, electrifying seats and selling life insurance policies, you know, Mergo, Percepto, Illusiono, as John Waters says, give me your money-o. But I think he does give Bela Lugosi and Dracula and, you know, the theatrics of those performances credit to his inspiration. I mean, he was figuring out who he was as a young teenager. And at age 15, I think my dad says that Bela Lugosi referred him to the stage manager to stage manage Dracula as it went on tour. And my dad actually became the stage manager for Dracula. So it had a huge influence on him.
He loved that William Castle was a showman. William Castle was an amazing showman, and I think my dad realized that he was in a business called show business, right? And William Castle really put the show in show business, and so I think he loved it. And he's a huge star to a new generation, and he kept doing that. You know, he appeared in things like Batman in the 60s and Get Smart and the Brady Bunch, and that brought him to a new generation, then Thriller and Tim Burton movies in the 80s and 90s. So my dad was all about staying current, and William Castle made him very current for the 50s.
When Vincent interacted with the Tingler, it was total business, total acting, because he could not afford to make fun of this, you know, as we do oftentimes nowadays and whatever, and go back. No. He was very serious, and he created that feeling on the set that this was serious business, something to be afraid of.
I was in the Army in Texas, and I hated the Army. I was not an Army guy. And we were watching, they had a show called Shock Theater there. And we saw it one night on TV. It was just a host, great guy, but he just talked a little, that was it. I thought, what if we went down there and talked to them and see about, so we went down and talked to them and said, look, if you'll just pay for materials, we'll do a monster for you every week for the show. Because I had to do something else with the Army thing. And they said, fine, let's try it. Well, we did it for almost a year and a half, you know, and we did mummies, and I did her as the Bride of Frankenstein, and everything, whatever it was, werewolves. Well, while we were doing that, all of a sudden it appears that Bill Castle's coming into town with a Tingler. And the Texas Theater was the biggest theater in San Antonio. It was going to show it. And that's when you have some of the seats wired up and all that stuff. Well, they said, well, will you guys go out and meet William Castle at the airport and give him the key to the city or something, and bring him back in? I said, sure, okay. So Miss Schott presented him with the skeleton key of the city, which he got a great kick out of, because he was a real showman, this guy. And he said, now, tomorrow we're going to wire up the theaters. You'd like to come over and see what we're doing over there? And I said, yeah. So I got to help wire up the theaters, too. Now, really, there's about 30 seats they wire up all over the theater. And what they are, they're not electric, of course. I mean, somebody have a heart attack, you know. But, and of course, with him screaming and saying it's a Tingler, everybody scream and all that, it worked really well.
The power, cut it! Wait a minute, look!
You are still in your own world, Earth. The year is 2071.
The Time Travelers. Preston Foster, Philip Carey, Mary Anders, John Hoyt, and Dennis Patrick take you into a world beyond belief, where a season's growth can be condensed into seconds. Variable light becomes a seductive melodic symphony. And the Lumicord, the love machine, gives sensuous stimulation that conditions both men and women to a fuller, richer life of love. This is the world of the force field barrier, the laser pulse beam, the vibratransporter, and the Alpha Centauri starship. In the year 2071, scientific superbrains manufacture almost human robots. Whole armies of androids that fight off the feared mutants.
We are the last normal human beings on Earth. There is a creeping death all around us, and we cannot stay.
Where can you go?
To another planetary system.
Wait a minute, you can't go out there. The mutants are everywhere. They're fighting.
What enamored me of the time travelers was a totally new idea of using magicians' illusions that existed and just change them a little bit and using them instead of very, very expensive special effects that cost a mint. And we did incredible things.
Chicken fields. Woo, just like the fun house.
If you have seen it, you may remember the man with the head injury in one shot, where you see him pulling out the head and putting out the new head. In one shot, you never got away from it. That actually happened.
The unit is locked on with the magnetic ring.
Actually, if you were to say to me, do you like the 50s or do you like where we are now, I'd choose the 50s. I think it was a gentler way of life. People were definitely nicer. I remember in the 50s, my mother, for instance, didn't even know what it was to go to work. Her husband looked after her. She got her money to run the household, to buy the groceries, to do the food, everything. She wouldn't have wanted to go to work. And today, women have to work. Most homes are two income in order to keep going. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think we are losing our ability to address one another and look at one another. It was a softer, it was a kinder, and much more gentle time.
Well, I think probably after the Red Scare and all that stuff into the 50s, maybe even the early 60s, I think America kind of lost a lot of stuff, I don't know what, they just lost interest in a lot of things. I can't tell you why. I guess just things changed. Yeah, everything changed. The world changed.
And you went from this age of innocence and these fears about the atomic bomb to really different fears, and an era of Vietnam, and the world changed, and innocence was gone.
I think that the reason these films are so popular again is that everything is suspicion now. And I believe that fed into the way the United States was feeling back in 1959, plus which, in addition to the paranoia, these films are fun. I love looking at them. I don't laugh at them really, but I just think, God, they're fun. They're simplistic. They're not terribly subtle. They're just fun to watch.
How do you feel about being in what is probably the most iconic photo from the atomic age?
I am just thrilled.
I love being in the picture. I call it the picture that will not die. They have used it to advertise everything under the sun. That picture has been on book covers. It's advertised, it advertised hummus. It said, flavors that scream.
The atomic age soon became the space age. Fantastic and futuristic technology like rockets and laser beams turned science fiction into science fact. Fortunately, Hollywood films have left a lasting legacy of monsters, Martians, and mad scientists to honor the atomic age.